Commission hearings anytime you cross railroad tracks. The trail will have a bridge at the south end because there's no road crossing at the south end. It's utilizing the Con Ed line. But at the north end along Burnham Avenue, the engineering was going to stay at grade and substitute that 5-foot sidewalk for a 10-foot pathway, and then put in pedestrian crossing gates, put in signage, put in railings that would keep people confined so that once that crossing gate came down, they wouldn't be able to cross the tracks. That's all part of the engineering. That needs to be approved by the Illinois Commerce Commission. We started those Commerce Commission hearings almost 4 years ago now. And to our amazement and surprise, one of the railroads, the Northwest Indiana Commuter Transit District, came to the hearing and said, we oppose this project. We want the village to build another bridge at the north end of the village. That's not part of the engineering. That's another multi-million-dollar project. In Illinois Commerce Commission hearings, we've been making the argument before the judge that the village would be willing to pursue that as a totally separate project, but please, judge, don't hold up the current project. We don't want to lose all the money that's been put in place to build this project. But the judge, Illinois Commerce Commission hearings, the judges really try to go overboard to reach a compromise so that both sides are agreeing. But we've gone on 4 years and we haven't reached an agreement with the railroads to build a new bridge. And instead of following through on the project as designed, we've always made the statement as a separate project that would be fine. So the railroads continue to oppose it. We're now in a position where we will be going to what's called an evidentiary hearing before the judge, which is very much like a court case. We have to have, the railroads have identified 5 expert witnesses that are going to testify. The attorney that's representing the village will be cross-examining those witnesses. We're going to be introducing our own expert witnesses. And we feel, we don't know for sure until the Illinois Commerce Commission judge makes a judgment. But the Illinois Commerce Commission engineering staff, safety staff have recommended approval of the village's project with the at-grade crossing. IDOT, the Secretary of IDOT, Randy Blankenhorn, the top IDOT official in Illinois, has thrown his support behind the village and the project as designed. And we believe the railroads are, we believe they're going to lose. We won't know that until the judge makes a determination. The railroads, though, have then the option of appealing the judge's decision. We can go into another court system, and we can argue this for several more years. So at this point, the Illinois Department of Transportation announced a grant for trail projects. That grant is called ITEP, I-T-E-P. The deadline for application is this Friday. We've put together an application, and so what we've done is put together an application that would pay the preliminary engineering for an additional bridge. And we're doing this to show the railroads and the judge in the ICC that the village in good faith is not just saying that they'll pursue a bridge someday in the future, but is willing to pursue the federal funding for a bridge, and we're willing to move on that. And we think that may help in the court case. We don't know. With the ICC judge. This is obviously a complicated issue, so I want to make sure I'm covering everything. In applying for funding for an additional bridge at the north end, we're kicking off the beginning of another very expensive process of doing preliminary engineering, final engineering, and construction funding. We would have to pursue federal funding at all those stages. At each stage, it will take a 20% local match. Up till now, when open lands and a number of other trail agencies approached the village in 2007, 2008, we made a commitment that as non-for-profits and separate agencies, we would identify the funding for the village to always achieve this 20% local match, that we wouldn't be putting any financial burdens on the village. We've raised the funding to cover the village's attorney that is representing the village in the ICC hearings. We raised the funding to acquire the parcel of land from Norfolk and Southern at the south end of this project, which was a 3/4 acre parcel that terminates right at State Road. That was about 2 years ago that the village now owns that parcel. Yes. That would be part of the project. So we've been raising this funding all the way along, and we still would make that commitment to the village, that we don't want to put the financial onus on the village for any of these local match monies. So in the application for ITEP funding that would kick off this process, there is a new wrinkle now that the Federal Highway Administration that administers the federal grants has put in place 3 or 4 years ago. It says that if an applicant pursues federal funding and then just doesn't do the project, that the applicant then would be potentially liable for returning that funding to the federal government. So we don't want to apply for $200,000 in federal funding unless we know this project's going to go all the way through to completion. And that means that the grant is going to be conditional. What we'd like to do is submit the grant this Friday. We'd like to put a resolution on your agenda at your next meeting where you would either approve or disapprove the grant application. That's up to you. If you were to disapprove it, we'll pull the grant immediately. We just write a letter to IDOT and say the grant's pulled.
You have the resolution here tonight?
No, I don't have it tonight. I think that'll be for your next board meeting.
Yeah, I know, but I think you sent it already to the village, right?
I did send a draft of a resolution. I think the village attorney and you should all take a look at that. The other condition, though, is identifying the 20% local funding for preliminary engineering, final engineering, which is going to be substantial. It's going to approach $1 million. So we are also putting the additional condition that unless we're able with the railroads, Ford, which is the creator of the problem that is kicking the railroads into this opposition, other corporations or foundations, unless we can identify all the funding that will allow this whole project to move forward by February of next year, IDOT is going to announce the grant recipients in March or April. And so we don't want IDOT announcing that you've received a grant to do the phase 1 engineering unless we've got all the funding in place and committed. And if we don't get that funding in place and committed by February from the railroads, Ford, other corporations or foundations, we're going to recommend that we write a letter to IDOT and pull the grant in February. And then it just be dropped. Now we think this is a $200,000 grant that, and I'm saying it's about $1 million that's going to be needed to put this whole project together. It's about 1.2 million. And we're going to be setting up a meeting that with Ford, with the railroads, and we're going to ask that they make some commitments to financially secure this project. If they don't, like I say, I think we're going to pull the funding, pull the application, because we certainly don't want to put the village in a position of moving forward on a project unless the funding's in place. So I think that is a summary pretty much of where we're at right now.
Do we need do we need 2 bridges now?
So there would be an additional bridge at the north end.
We're going to have to do a north bridge and a south.
Yeah, and what we're hoping is that if the railroads and Ford and everybody see that that bridge is moving forward, that they would allow then the current village project to also move forward, get built. It'll be an at-grade crossing until that new bridge gets built. And bicyclists and pedestrians, to be really honest, are going to cross at grade because that's the quickest, easiest if there's no trains here. But if there is a train blocking Burnham Avenue, they will have this bridge as an option. In addition, this bridge will be designed to carry a police car or a small ambulance. So there's also this health, safety, welfare issue of the trains blocking emergency vehicles from getting north of the tracks when needed. And I think that's going to be very important to IDOT. And that's the case that we're going to make to Ford when we meet with Ford. That this isn't just being generous, Ford, that we would like you to do a community project. This is a statewide trail. And this is a problem that you're causing. And there's a responsibility we feel you have as a corporation to solve this problem. That's a whole different kind of a frame, I think, in which to talk with Ford and the railroads, than just say, we'd like a grant to do something nice locally. This is a much bigger project, although it's going to be, I think it's a great project for the village because it connects your neighborhoods. It gives people another option for moving back and forth. So,
thank you, Darren.
okay.
Thank you. One quick question, I'm sorry. Andrew Horvath, I'm the fire chief in town.
Sure.
Am I understanding you to say that they will not build the bridge on the south end unless the entire project can go through with over the tracks on the north end as well?
What we're hoping is that the ICC judge will approve the project as designed.
Grade level.
Grade level.
Yeah.
And then knowing that the village and the railroads and Ford and everybody have reached an agreement to proceed on an additional bridge as a separate project. Now, we don't know that the railroads will necessarily agree with that. They may say, well, we don't want to see the rest of the project built until this north end bridge gets built. We don't know what's going to happen, to be honest, but one way or the other, we'd like to see the whole project and the bridge at the north end.
And the north end bridge, is that going to be part of that in Chicago?
It's going to depend on the design. It's I think a 5% slope, and so as it comes down along Brainerd Avenue, the bottom of that slope is going to come real close to the city limits, so we don't quite know where it will be. When it hits, you can't just have a bridge slope come down and not have the trail continue.
Yeah.
So our thinking is that CDOT with the city of Chicago then would be the agency to just put in a 10-foot trail to the stoplight that's right by the South Shore Station. And at that point, that's where the ID&R trail is coming down the Continental Line, hitting Brainerd Avenue. It's a perfect connection.
Thank you.
They've been fighting us with that, right, at grade. They've been fighting the crossing at the at grade level.
Yes,
They've been holding us
because
up.
of the stalled trains, and they're worried about the traffic nuisance and the liability it creates.
Thank you, Darren. Thank you.
While we're still here, when we revisit, can we strike the verbiage of that the water department designated police department can access your home at any time, any day to access the meter? Can we strike that verbiage also? Because we have to have some type of a order as far as, when they'll come. I don't think they're just going to any time.
Well, I think basically, again, village ordinance, as far as the village goes, as far as the municipality goes, is like the holy Bible for the village. However, it does not mean because it's in the ordinance that the village has to carry it out. I mean, it's only there in the event if we had to carry it out. You know what I'm saying? So it does not mean that the water department or a contractor or somebody will show up at your house at 3 o'clock in the morning. But on the other hand, you may be somebody who's not cooperating, and you won't cooperate with the village, and that language is there, so then if we did have to do that, then we would be legal.
Well, but that just opens us up for, I'd like maybe a standard across the board as far as this is the set times, and this is when the inspection will be done, or the meter reading instead of any time of the day at any time. If because then that's not really giving residents their use of enjoyment.
Well, like I said again, I mean, just because it's there, it does not necessarily mean that it will be done. I mean, but it's there that if it has to be done, I mean, then we can do it legally.
Maybe we can strike that, or maybe reconsider that verbiage right there.
Just the hours.
Well, we can talk to the attorney about that.
There's a court order, but a court order you can get at any time, right? You have to see the
I mean,
judge.
just make it a little more specific than
If
any
I can
time, any
respond.
day. Yes, sir.
The engineer brought that issue up specifically. In an emergency situation, you have to have access.
Let's
And
put that verbiage on there.
he had definite examples of that. That's why that language.
It doesn't say emergency
It's not there,
situations.
then you're gonna have an
It
inspector.
doesn't say emergency
Not after 3
situation.
o'clock in the morning.
It says the village has a right to come into your house
And I
and
forget
put your
the
meter
town
anytime they
admin,
want. If you refuse,
but
they'll
there
turn
was
the
a
water
break in
on.
the line, the basements were flooding,
What if
people
your
were not
dog's in
at
your house? What if,
home,
what if
and the
child
property was
There's a
irreparably
lot of
damaged.
reasons you might not want to let them in your house.
So it was put in there explicitly that you have the power to do that. It doesn't, as the mayor said, doesn't mean you're gonna go doing that.
I understand, but it still gives us the right to do it, to come to anyone's home at any time, any day.
I mean, if it needs to be done, if it needs to be done, you gotta understand, if it needs to be done, it needs to be done, then it will be done.
I just like to clarify that verbiage a little better, to
What
have
would
it
be
a
the
little more
reason it needs to
detailed,
be
a little
done?
more defined as
Okay, we can
set
take that.
limits.
We can take that.
Thank you.
Well, before we adjourn, again, I'd like to say that any burdens that you have, please try to get rid of them. I mean, because a burden is a bad thing, and I am so glad again, I mean, that a big burden was lifted off of this town. And I thank God, in Jesus' name.
I think I'm a burden now, wait.
I think I'll ask for a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
A motion was by trustee Cap.
Second.
Second by
They
trustee
already
Claybrook.
set the place to my house, gave me 4 tickets on a vehicle.
Yes.
Told me my car
Yes.
is away.
Trustee Garcia?
He's been harassing me for 12
Trustee
years.
Greer?
Yes.
Trustee Richardson?
Yes.
Trustee Claybrook?
Yes.
Thank you,
Motion passed and burden been lifted.
I didn't know you guys would get access.
Not lifted yet. We'll file
Good job. I didn't make the meeting last time, and I enjoyed looking at it.
Oh, thank you. I actually
Good
missed
job.
the last one, so
I don't know
either
who
me or my
taped it.
wife will come
Okay.
and come
Yeah,
in once in a
very good. I
while.
like
Thank
that.
you. Thank you.